There comes a moment in life when the structures you depended on begin to fail you. The beliefs that once gave you certainty feel hollow. The identity you carefully built no longer fits. You try to fix it. You try to go back. You try to hold yourself together, but nothing works. And what terrifies you most is not the pain. It's the suspicion that this destruction is not a mistake. That something deeper is happening beneath the surface. Something you were never meant to control. This is not the end of you. This is the end of who you thought you were. Your old self is being destroyed, and you were never meant to stop it. What you are experiencing may feel like disorder, but the psyche does not collapse without reason. What appears as chaos is often an inner intelligence demanding reorganization. When the old inner architecture can no longer hold the weight of who you are becoming, it begins to fracture. This is not a malfunction of the mind. It is a signal that growth has reached a threshold. The psyche, like nature, follows cycles. It builds, stabilizes, and eventually dismantles what has become too narrow for further life. Across cultures and throughout history, moments of inner breakdown have appeared at critical transitions. Initiation rites, spiritual crises, midlife reckonings, and periods of exile all reflect the same psychological truth: transformation rarely arrives gently. It announces itself through disruption. Adulthood brings the collapse of childhood illusions. Loss strips away imagined permanence. Failure dismantles false confidence. Even success can provoke inner disorientation when the outer achievement no longer matches inner meaning. These experiences unsettle the ego because they expose its limitations. Modern psychology confirms what ancient wisdom already knew. Research on post-traumatic growth shows that many individuals report greater depth, meaning, resilience, and clarity after psychological collapse. Not because the suffering was pleasant, but because it forced a confrontation with reality. Anxiety, depression, and existential confusion often precede profound identity shifts. They arise when the psyche recognizes that the life being lived no longer reflects the truth trying to emerge. The mind cannot grow indefinitely within the same structure. An identity is formed to meet certain conditions: family expectations, cultural demands, survival needs. For a time it works. It provides stability, direction, and belonging. But as life expands, that same structure becomes restrictive. When an identity has fulfilled its purpose, it does not politely step aside. It cracks under pressure. The restlessness you feel is not accidental. The irritation with your own routines, the boredom with familiar roles, the quiet sense that something essential is missing, these are signs that the psyche is outgrowing its former shape. Many people misinterpret this stage as personal failure. They believe something has gone wrong, that they should be grateful, disciplined, or more positive. But this misreading deepens the conflict. The psyche does not respond to moral pressure. It responds to truth. When you attempt to force yourself to remain who you were, the inner tension increases. Symptoms intensify. What could have been a meaningful transition becomes prolonged suffering. This is why trying to stay the same at this stage only amplifies pain. Stability becomes stagnation. Comfort turns into confinement. The unconscious applies pressure precisely because growth is being resisted. You may notice emotional volatility, recurring dreams, sudden fatigue, or an uncharacteristic loss of motivation. These are not signs of weakness. They are indicators that the unconscious is active, insisting on expansion beyond the limits of the old identity. Consider how nature handles growth. A seed does not remain intact when it becomes a tree. Its shell must break. From the outside, the process looks destructive. From within, it is necessary. The psyche follows the same logic. What is breaking is not your essence, but the form that once contained it. The fear arises because the ego confuses itself with the whole of the personality. It experiences any threat to its structure as annihilation. Yet beneath this fear is a deeper movement toward wholeness. The unconscious does not aim to destroy you. It aims to complete you. It dismantles what has become rigid so that what is alive can move again. When the breakdown is understood in this way, it loses some of its terror. It becomes intelligible. even meaningful. If you feel restless without knowing why, disconnected from routines that once grounded you, or irritated by a life that looks acceptable on the surface, do not rush to label this as dysfunction. Listen, something in you is demanding reorganization. Something is asking for a larger container. This stage is uncomfortable because it exists between what has ended and what has not yet taken form. But it is precisely here that the psyche prepares the ground for transformation. The breakdown is not random. It is not punishment. It is psychic necessity. The panic you feel in moments of inner collapse does not arise from the whole of your being. It comes from a smaller, more fragile center within you, the ego. This is the identity you learn to wear in order to survive, to be approved of, to function in the world. It was shaped by necessity. It learned what earned love, what avoided rejection, what ensured safety. For a long time, it served you well. But it was never meant to be permanent. The ego fears dissolution more than it fears pain. Pain can be endured if the structure of identity remains intact. What it cannot tolerate is uncertainty, the sense that it may no longer exist in its current form. This is why, when transformation begins, resistance appears immediately. You cling not because the old life is fulfilling, but because it is familiar. Familiarity gives the illusion of safety, even when it is quietly destroying you. This is why people remain in careers that drain their spirit, relationships that diminish their vitality, and routines that slowly numb their inner life. From the outside, it appears irrational. Why stay where there is no joy? Why tolerate what erodes your sense of self? But the ego is not guided by fulfillment. It is guided by continuity. It would rather suffer predictably than risk the unknown. The ego whispers convincing arguments. It tells you that stability is responsibility, that desire is dangerous, that change is reckless. It reminds you of your age, your obligations, your past decisions. It insists that now is not the right time. In truth, these are not insights, they are defenses. The ego constructs narratives to preserve itself, even when preservation comes at the cost of inner truth. What you often call losing yourself during these periods is not the disappearance of your essence, but the loosening of a false structure. The fear feels like death because, symbolically, it is. Every profound transformation demands a death, not of the body, but of an identity that can no longer carry the fullness of life. Initiation myths across cultures speak of descent, dismemberment, darkness, and exile before renewal. The psyche follows the same pattern. Something must end for something larger to begin. This is why the ego fights so fiercely. It cannot imagine life beyond its own boundaries. It does not know what comes next, and it interprets that ignorance as annihilation. Yet growth has never come from certainty. Every expansion of consciousness has emerged from stepping beyond what was known, beyond what felt safe, beyond what could be controlled. Consider moments in your own life when growth occurred. You did not feel ready. You felt afraid. You felt exposed. Yet only afterward did you recognize that those moments reshaped you. At the time, the ego experienced threat. In retrospect, the deeper self experienced liberation. The resistance you feel now is not proof that you are on the wrong path. It is evidence that the ego is being asked to loosen its grip. Anxiety often arises when the ego senses it can no longer dominate the inner life. Depression can emerge when the old identity has lost meaning, but the new one has not yet formed. These states are painful, but they are also transitional. They indicate movement. The tragedy occurs when this resistance is mistaken for truth. When the voice of fear is treated as wisdom, when the ego's demand for certainty overrides the psyche's call for growth. In such cases, people harden. They shrink their inner world to preserve a familiar self. Over time, this creates bitterness, resentment, and a vague sense of having betrayed something essential. The ego was never meant to disappear, but it was never meant to rule alone. Its task is to serve the larger personality, not imprison it. When it resists change, it is not evil, it is afraid. But fear cannot be the final authority in a life that seeks wholeness. If you feel torn between who you have been and who you sense you must become. Recognize this struggle for what it is. It is not weakness. It is the threshold. The ego trembles because it stands at the edge of its own limitation. And beyond that edge is not emptiness, but expansion, an unknown life that cannot be accessed without surrendering the certainty that once kept you safe. What we often call suffering is rarely an accident or a punishment. It is a signal, a call from the unconscious, an invitation to enter a deeper dialogue with life. When pain is avoided, it does not vanish. Instead, it burrows into the hidden recesses of the psyche, festering like a shadow that is never acknowledged. Grief that is denied becomes despair. Rage that is suppressed transforms into resentment. Shame, hidden in silence, twists into self-loathing. Fear, locked away, emerges as compulsive behaviors, addictive patterns, or a persistent numbness that dulls experience. Modern research confirms what the psyche has always known. Unprocessed emotional pain is strongly correlated with behaviors that undermine life itself. Anxiety, self-sabotage, and emotional withdrawal are not random misfortunes. They are the echoes of what was never confronted. Yet suffering, when faced consciously, carries the seed of transformation. It is the threshold through which the psyche demands passage. Individuals who have faced total collapse, burnout, profound loss, failure, betrayal, often describe these as the moments that reshape their existence. At the time, such experiences feel unbearable, a descent into chaos. Yet later, in reflection, they recognize that it was precisely this confrontation that stripped away illusions, forcing honesty with oneself and with life. The comfort of avoidance is seductive, but it does not lead to depth. True insight, true growth, demands courage. The courage not to resolve everything immediately, not to escape discomfort, but to remain present, to feel, to observe, to ask the dangerous questions that the ego shies away from. Consider the person who loses a career, or the individual whose relationship dissolves, or the one confronted with a health crisis that strips away the veneer of stability. In the moment, these events feel like punishment, a rupture in the familiar fabric of life. Yet for those who do not turn away, who do not mask pain with distraction, something profound occurs. They encounter themselves fully, without pretense, without the habitual filters of denial and justification. The suffering becomes intelligible because it is confronted, not because it is pleasant. The darkness is not a place to be feared, but a territory in which meaning can be forged. This stage demands patience as much as courage. It requires that one be willing to feel grief without drowning, to feel rage without lashing out, to feel shame without collapsing into self-rejection. The soul asks for honesty. The mind often resists. The body may rebel. Yet within this triangulation of discomfort, a hidden order emerges. Patterns of life become visible. The choices that were made unconsciously, the compromises that eroded vitality, the illusions that shaped identity, these become illuminated when suffering is allowed to speak. Listening is more important than solving. Observation matters more than action at first. In this silence, the psyche begins to reorganize itself, using the very intensity of pain as a sculptor's tool, carving the raw material of experience into forms of clarity, insight, and strength. Real life examples abound. Individuals who experience the collapse of relationships, professional failure, or the loss of reputation often describe these as paradoxically liberating. They are forced to confront what was never true within their lives, the compromises, the masks, the self-deceptions. Burnout in a career may lead to rediscovery of passion. Profound grief may awaken empathy and purpose that were dormant. The dissolution of comfort may reveal hidden capacities for resilience. None of this diminishes the intensity of suffering. Indeed, it is precisely that intensity that catalyzes transformation. Without the fire, the metal remains unchanged. It is the heat of confrontation, the encounter with unadulterated pain, that tempers character and deepens consciousness. Confronting suffering is not a call to heroic struggle in the external sense, but a call to radical presence internally. To sit with the discomfort, to acknowledge it without escape, is to honor the psyche's intelligence. The temptation to distract, to numb, or to rationalize is enormous. Yet every effort to avoid the dark only postpones growth. Courage here does not mean defeating pain or turning it into a story of triumph immediately. It means allowing oneself to be fully present with it, to meet it as a companion rather than an enemy. In doing so, the shadow is illuminated and meaning begins to emerge. Meaning is never found by avoiding darkness. It is forged in the crucible of experience, in the conscious engagement with the very suffering we instinctively recoil from. Each fear faced, each grief witnessed, each shame acknowledged becomes a stepping stone into a fuller existence. Pain, when encountered with honesty and awareness, transforms into the language through which life teaches, the teacher that cannot be ignored, the necessary force that guides toward wholeness. In this way, suffering is no longer random, no longer senseless. It becomes the very medium through which the soul is invited to awaken and the personality is compelled to expand. What is being dismantled within you is not your essence, nor the core of your being. What is being broken is the structure that no longer fits, the misalignment between the life you are living and the life your deeper self is calling you to inhabit. The unconscious does not act out of malice, nor does it seek to punish. It communicates in a language that is symbolic, indirect, and often unsettling. Dreams intensify in their vividness. Recurring images or strange scenarios appear with insistence. Old memories resurface unbidden, and emotions that were once manageable now surge with an intensity that cannot be ignored. These are not random malfunctions. They are messages. They are signals from a part of yourself that has been suppressed or neglected, insisting on recognition. Many encounter these phenomena during periods commonly described as midlife crises, after significant successes, or following profound loss. To the external eye, life may appear orderly, even prosperous. Responsibilities are met. Social appearances are maintained. Yet inwardly, there is a sense of emptiness, a subtle death, a hollowing that is deeply disquieting. That deadness is the soul's protest. It is the psyche speaking. You are living in a manner that does not honor your inner truth. You are ignoring the voice that knows you more completely than you yourself do. The unconscious is not the enemy, it is the guide. Its methods may be harsh, but its interventions dramatic. But its aim is alignment, not destruction. When one ceases the habitual resistance to this process, when one stops dismissing or rationalizing the signals of the unconscious, a profound shift begins. Patterns emerge in life that were previously hidden. Repeated mistakes, recurring disappointments, and persistent discomforts become legible. The moments when you betrayed your own values or silenced your desires come into focus. Forgotten ambitions, abandoned dreams, and repressed creativity demand acknowledgement. The unconscious is patient, but persistent until these elements are recognized and reintegrated. What appears chaotic is actually a process of realignment, an opportunity for the psyche to reclaim what has been lost to conformity, fear, or habit. The manifestations of this process are unmistakable. You may find yourself drawn to situations that test you, emotions that overwhelm you, or people who mirror your unacknowledged qualities. You may experience a surge of intuition, a clarity of perception, or unexpected insights that feel foreign to the habitual self. Even discomfort, pain, and anxiety carry meaning, for they are the instruments through which the unconscious teaches. Every amplified emotion, every haunting dream, every internal conflict is a doorway into understanding yourself more fully. The task is not to resist or control these experiences, but to observe, reflect, and allow them to inform your choices. It is critical to recognize that the unconscious does not destroy without purpose. Its work is not arbitrary. It dismantles what no longer serves growth, exposing what is stagnant, rigid, or misaligned. By doing so, it clears space for transformation, for the emergence of capacities and possibilities that could not exist under the old structure. This destruction is selective and intentional, not blind or vengeful. The unconscious operates according to principles that often transcend the ego's understanding, acting as a guide toward wholeness rather than a force of annihilation. Those who learn to listen, who cease fighting this process begin to notice a subtle but profound shift in their inner life. They develop an awareness of patterns and themes that were once invisible. They recognize how certain beliefs, habits, and relationships have constrained growth, and they become capable of choices informed by deeper insight rather than habit or fear. They begin to reclaim parts of themselves that had been suppressed, discovering capacities for courage, creativity, and authenticity that had lain dormant. The unconscious, once feared for its unpredictability, becomes a trusted companion, guiding toward paths that are often hidden from the conscious mind, but essential for true development. Understanding the unconscious in this way transforms fear into opportunity. What once appeared as random disruption now reveals itself as a carefully orchestrated process of alignment. The soul's unrest, the amplified emotions, the recurring images in dreams, the resurfacing memories, these are all invitations to reclaim yourself, to recognize the truth you have avoided, and to reconstruct a life that is congruent with your deepest self. The unconscious does not act to punish, but to teach. It does not destroy without reason, but dismantles in order to rebuild, to guide you toward a life of integrity, vitality, and inner harmony. What is being deconstructed is not your being. It is your misalignment, and through this process, the path toward wholeness is revealed. What emerges after the collapse is not a polished or improved replica of who you once were. It is not simply a better version of the old self that can continue along the same paths, repeating the same patterns with minor adjustments. What comes forth is something entirely new, something more complete, more truthful, and more aligned with the totality of your being. The process of destruction, the breakdown of old identities, the unearthing of suppressed emotions, the confrontation with shadow elements, is not an end in itself. It is a necessary precursor to integration. Only by allowing the old structures to fall, by enduring the uncertainty and pain of their dismantling, can the psyche reconstruct itself in a way that is whole. Integration begins with the reclamation of parts of yourself that you have disowned. The strength you suppressed out of fear of rejection, the sensitivity you rejected in order to survive, the ambition you feared because it might draw envy or judgment, the boundaries you avoided because you sought approval or connection, all of these pieces are recovered, reconciled, and reintegrated. Each element is given its rightful place within the architecture of the personality. This process is subtle and profound, and its effects are transformative. It creates depth where there was once superficiality. It generates wholeness where fragmentation prevailed. It fosters a quiet, unshakable confidence that does not depend on external validation, but is rooted in the knowledge that you are aligned with your own truth. People who emerge from this process often speak of a remarkable sense of calm. It is not a calm born of avoidance or numbness, but of alignment. The compulsion to perform to please, to maintain appearances diminishes because the inner life has been acknowledged and integrated. Values become clearer, not because they are imposed or logical, but because they resonate with the totality of experience. Relationships deepen, not because of effort or manipulation, but because you are no longer interacting from fragments or masks. There is a directness and honesty in connection that is only possible when the psyche is no longer divided against itself. This calm is often mistaken for resignation or passivity by those who have not undergone the process, but it is in fact the dynamic stillness of a soul that has been made whole. The transformation is not about comfort. Life does not necessarily become easier. Difficulties may persist, challenges may intensify, and the external world may remain indifferent. What changes is the internal structure, the way life is experienced and navigated. Decisions are made from clarity rather than confusion. Choices are guided by integrity rather than fear. The chaos that once seemed unbearable is now seen as the raw material for growth and understanding. The individual who has undergone this process lives from alignment, moving through the world with purpose and authenticity, rather than reacting compulsively to circumstance or expectation. This is why the destruction must not be halted prematurely. Resistance to collapse keeps the psyche fragmented. Attempting to preserve the old identity or to reconstruct life before the lessons have been fully integrated ensures that the same patterns will recur. Fragmentation persists, and the opportunity for wholeness is deferred. The unconscious will continue to apply pressure through dreams, emotions, and disruptions until the necessary work is done. Only by surrendering to the process, by allowing the old self to dissolve in order to make space for the integrated self, can the full potential of the psyche be realized. Integration also brings with it a subtle but profound sense of freedom. The parts of yourself that were once feared or hidden are no longer threats, they are allies. Sensitivity becomes insight, ambition becomes direction, strength becomes presence, and boundaries become protection for the integrity of the self. Life is no longer lived through compromise and concealment, but through authenticity and engagement. The inner turbulence that once seemed threatening has been transmuted into energy, awareness, and clarity. You move through the world not as a fragmented assembly of contradictory parts, but as a unified being capable of creativity, connection, and deep reflection. This process demonstrates that destruction is never arbitrary. It is an essential prelude to wholeness. Without it, the ego and consciousness remain incomplete, forever divided, forever seeking safety at the cost of vitality. By embracing the dissolution of what is no longer necessary, by confronting the darkness and enduring the uncertainty, the psyche reconstructs itself into a form that is more than survival, more than adaptation. It becomes life in alignment with its own truth. What is forged on the other side of destruction is the integrated self, whole, resilient, authentic, and capable of meeting life with clarity, courage, and quiet strength. You were never meant to stop the destruction, because stopping it would mean remaining fragmented, unaligned, and untrue to the totality of your being. Only through the process of dismantling and integration can the full spectrum of your potential be realized. If your old self is breaking down, do not rush to rebuild it. Do not numb it. Do not romanticize it either. Witness it. What is falling apart was once necessary, but it is no longer sufficient. And what is being born does not need your control. It needs your courage. This is not your collapse. This is your initiation.